Okay, so in this video, we're going to talk about artificial selection, and then we'll also compare it to natural selection. All right. So one of the main differences between natural selection and artificial selection is that it's humans, not the environment, that are selecting desirable traits to be passed on to the next generation. I think one of the most common examples and easiest examples to visualize this is through the domestication of dogs. So, looking at DNA analysis, scientists know that dogs are descendants of wolves. And so, over the last 10,000 years, humans have selected traits that we desire in our dogs and bred them for it. So, whether your dog is a cuddly type dog, or a hunter, or a bloodhound, or a husky, they all have different traits that we have selected for and then bred those over the years, over the generations. We also see this in the domestication of our food, whether it's plants or livestock, plants and animals. And so one of my favorite foods is are broccoli and cauliflower and cabbage and Brussels sprouts. And so these cruciferous vegetables are all from the same wild mustard plant. And then throughout thousands of years, humans have selected different traits, and now we have these different varieties of crops, picking traits that we want in our food. So, for example, let's go ahead and see, like, if I was a farmer and I plant a tomato crop. Right, so here I have some tomato plants and I see, wow, this plant produced so many more tomatoes than my other plants. That's the one that I want to breed. So I harvest the seeds from that plant. And then in my next generation, that is the one that I grow. And so in my next year, my next season, hopefully those crops also produce more tomatoes than average. And of course, there'll be variation within those offspring, those plants. So then I'll pick the seeds that I find the most desirable. And then I will plant those in the third generation. So over time, us humans, we have affected the variation in other species. We are the ones who are choosing the desirable traits and then driving that change over time in these species. So we can see that in corn. Corn thousands of years ago was like the size of a quarter, very small, but then we have chosen traits for like large amounts of the little kernels to be produced, right? So we have very large corn today. Same thing we've done in our livestock. So here we have cows, or cattle, but we've done the same thing with chickens and goats and sheep and pigs and horses, right? And so we have domesticated our animals and bred them for traits that we find desirable. So let's go ahead though and compare natural selection to artificial selection. So things they both have in common is that they both are resulting in changes in a population or species over time. But the difference is in natural selection, this is going to occur naturally, and in artificial selection, humans are the ones intervening. In natural selection, adaptive characteristics are selected for. And so what that means is for a particular environment, in a generation, in a population, there may be some traits that increase an organism's chance of surviving and reproducing, right? Increase their fitness. So those inherited traits, those characteristics are adaptive. They help them survive and reproduce. And those will be the traits that are selected for. And that all depends on the context of the environment. Versus artificial selection, humans are choosing the desirable traits that we are selecting for, and that will be what we breed, right? So in natural selection, it's the environment that exerts selective pressure on certain traits versus in artificial selection, humans are the selective pressure. And natural selection produces the biological diversity we see on Earth today, along with other mechanisms of evolution. And then in artificial selection, this creates the varieties of organisms that we see. For example, the different breeds in dogs, as my dog barks.